Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons. I've got this feeling.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the D's have recorded a 3-0 start to the season for the first time since the year 2021. Isn't it great not to have to be ticking off milestones for a while? Having said that, the Demons and Jake Bowie are now on a 10-game winning streak. Only 10 more to beat the club's 19-game winning streak set between 1955 and 1956. Joining me tonight, long-time Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Binman. Good evening to all our listeners. 3-0. So are we heading the same way as we did in 2021? And the big question is, with 4 of last year's finalists in the bottom 7, is our draw all that hard ahead of us now?
I was thinking about that. I was having a look at the ladder, and I was thinking, oh, geez, we haven't played anyone yet. And maybe we're going to have a good draw after all. Also joining us tonight, B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And I thought for a sec there, Andy, you're going to give us like the time capsule. Like the Beatles were number one. Oh, hold on, no. 2021, no, they weren't.
It was
Netflix's biggest hit was, was it even then? It was like...
It's a slight dig to a lot of my mates who are Carlton supporters who obviously do not listen to this program anyway, but they're all up and saying, the last time we were 3-0, it was 1995 and we won the premiership, and I was giving him a bit of stick for that, and then I remembered I was saying the same thing last year. So.
Yeah, it won't be quite as exciting on Demonland ticking off the breaking those embarrassing records. There's not too many left of them.
There's barely any left. Maybe back to back. Erasing that the record of the highest winning margin against us. There's not much left.
Not much left.
Before we get into my brief overview of the match, I just want to announce that this Wednesday night we'll be interviewing former Demon and current Premiership assistant coach Adam Uze, so look out for that special edition of the Demonland podcast. I can't wait. There's so much about his current role that I want to ask him about, and then there's his playing career to reminisce about. You guys excited about that?
Absolutely. What a get. When did you find that out? When did the club contact you?
Yeah, that's today. So I originally wanted to get a player on, but I'm quite happy to have Uze, who ticks both boxes, player and coach. So it's always good to sort of get the coaches and their perspective, and particularly after a premiership.
Absolutely, and he's a pretty cool, calm, collected fella, and I've heard him interviewed a few times, a handful of times recently, a week or so ago on the club's website, and he's really considered and thoughtful, and seems like a terrific get for an interview.
Look forward to it. So let's get into this match review. I went to the game into this game believing that it was a danger game for us. The Bombers, after being touted as premiership contenders, were staring down their worst start to a season in 55 years, and the D's were coming off a hard-fought interstate trip in sapping humidity, and we were coming into the match almost unchanged off a 6-day break to add insult to injury, or should I say insult to the health and safety protocols. Just hours before the game, before game time, we learned that our premiership spearhead, big, bad, bustling Benny Brown, otherwise known as BBBBB, has to pull out of the match after discovering that he's a COVID close contact. He was replaced by Sam Wiedemann, who would be under pressure to perform on the big stage. And as you can imagine, my nerves about this match being a danger game, they go completely into overdrive. And during the first quarter, that anxiousness was replaced by frustration, because the match could have and probably should have been well and truly over by quarter time. We dominated the quarter, but we could not get any reward for the efforts and put on some scoreboard pressure. Our yips in front of goals, that was a hallmark of some of the 2021 season, has well and truly returned. From half-time in the Gold Coast match until 9 minutes into the third quarter of the Essendon match, we kicked 7 goals, 19. Although I should say that in fairness and to add some balance to this discussion, from that point on we did kick 10 goals, 5. But back to the inaccuracy, you really can't afford to let teams have a sniff when you're dominating play and the inside 50 count, which in the end was 66-39, and you're not putting teams away. You open yourself up to giving teams a sniff, and as we know, momentum can easily shift, and if you let the opposition get on a roll like we did, let them get 6 out of 7 goals through the middle of the match, and then they did snatch the lead, you can be heading for a defeat. However, thankfully, this premiership team can withstand a challenge, unlike its predecessors, who I won't mention ever again. Might have squandered the opportunity. And this team does not get rattled. They can reset, they can wrestle momentum back their way and then cruise to victory, which we did to the tune of 5 goals. So all's well that ends well. And just before I get your comments, I thought whilst being tagged as heavily as his knee was bandaged, our Norm Smith medalist and already twice BOG in 2022, Christian Petrarca, he was held to 21 possessions, but the Bombers would soon find out that when you rob Peter to pay Paul, you forget about Oliver, who starred with 38 disposals, 18 contested, 8 marks, 8 clearances, 15 inside 50s, 9 score involvements, and an ominous and demon-appropriate 666 metres gained. Track's draft buddy Angus Brayshaw, he also starred on the night and he hit the record books where he's now equal 12th on the all-time most marks in a match with 20 marks. An incredible effort. It's just 4 marks shy of the record of 24 held by Demon Greg Park in 1970, also against Essendon. Gus also raked up 34 possessions on the night. George, do you have any general comments before B-Man goes into his dissertation on how we used control to manage the game?
No, I think we'll talk about all those things a bit later, but just on Petrarca's knee, which could well become a topic of conversation. I'm reminded when watching Goodwin on his interviews and media sites when he says this, his knee's absolutely 100%. I've got visions of Pinocchio at that particular time. That's the biggest bandage I've ever seen him wearing, and he wasn't quite right in this game. Let's hope that he does recover and there's not too much damage there.
There was a picture that he posted in the pre-season of him wearing some brace on his knee that looked like Darth Vader or something. It had all these attachments on it and he had some remote control to it, and I found out that it's something to do with blood flow and rigor. I didn't understand it all, but yeah, there's obviously some concerns, but he seems to still be able to play, and I don't think that's the reason why he had the quiet night. He was effectively sort of tagged. Big man?
Yeah, there was... I reckon he was a bit flat. I reckon the whole team was a bit flat. And the 6-day break and the humidity definitely played a factor in the way we played that game. And but yeah, Oliver was incredible, wasn't he? And Gus, I think that's his best game of footy at the that I've seen him play. There's probably not too many of those numbers were padded, and I think did you mention 20 marks as well?
Yes, I did mention the record. Yes,
it's like close to some sort of record, and I thought he was terrific. But it's interesting you mentioned the control. What I wanted to talk about in the tactics just briefly was sort of 4 games quickly. The analogy that we used a few times last year was basketball was a sort of analogy that could apply to the way we play footy and the importance of pacing. And the other one was rowing, that idea of being able to up the rating and put teams away. And I think that's something we do, that sort of surge football that we've got that ability to do. And there's a few clubs now that everyone's sort of all the teams bar Hawthorn probably that are sort of on the rise, and people are talking about Collingwood, Carlton, and who's the third one? So Collingwood and Carlton are bringing this pressure game to the fore and territory. And the way to think about that, I think, is the sort of wet weather footy, an analogy of wet weather footy is, you get distance and then you try to trap it down and keep it down your end. And that's what Melbourne and Masters about. It was really interesting about the inside 50s in this match that was so out of whack that Goodwin talked about in his presser that he was happy it was how the game, what they wanted to look, which was lots of inside 50s, but then trapping it in there. So that sort of model that we borrowed from Richmond and sort of put our twist on it really now is, everyone's favourite style of game. Geelong is the other team I was thinking of who have introduced this territory game to their, territory and win the contest ahead of the ball, back yourself in. They're playing a lot more direct as a result. I think the thing for me that's interesting that we've got that as well, that I think we've got a big advantage on those other clubs, and they're going to take 2 or 3 years to catch up, or 18 months to catch up, is our control of tempo. We talked a few times already about momentum, and we're really good at holding teams and making it difficult for them to score when they have the momentum. This was again a bit of a glitch on that. So that was a bit of a worry. We're really good at taking advantage of periods in the matches when we get momentum. In those other matches, the Collingwood game, the Cats had that momentum. The Pies had the momentum. That swung hard the other way. Carlton, Hawthorn as well. We're really good at minimising the damage. And the analogy that, the sport probably I love most other than footy is horse racing. And the analogy I think that we're bringing to it is in horse racing when, assuming the track is there's no bias, the way most sort of the good horses will get to the front and control tempo. So when you get a leader winning a horse race, it's generally, if the track's okay, it's because they've controlled the tempo. And Melbourne have become brilliant at controlling the tempo. So it's not just slowing the game down when we're under a bit of pressure. It's surging, stopping. So in a horse race, they'll often do that. They'll get to the lead, control the tempo, they'll accelerate a little bit, and then they'll drop it, the speed right back, and that makes it super hard for horses behind to get into a rhythm, and horses that like to come from the back statistically don't win near as often as the ones that sit up the front for a whole range of reasons, but tempo being one of them. In England, they address that by sending horses forward to create a truly run race. Melbourne play a really similar way. We get to a lead and then we hold that lead, and then we really take the speed out of the game and control the speed. And I think it's something that we seem to be really, really focused on this year and introducing. And you've heard Goody talk about it. We don't need to score, was his comment first week. And he sort of touched on a little bit about the fact that we're happy to have so many inside 50s. And we did it to Essendon. When we need to surge, we can. And the problem for the opposition is in order to get back into the game, if they're behind, is to go faster. That's the way to go. But as soon as Essendon did that in the match, the game opened up in that third quarter. They missed a target. I think it was Redmond, and I forget who he missed it to, but he coughed it over. We got the goal back to Harms, the short kick into Harms, and Harms goal. That turned the match. Even though the score went back and forward for a little while, suddenly it opened up because they went aggressive, but we were in control of the tempo again. And then once we got back in control, we stopped it. So the other games, Carlton jumped out of the blocks. Melbourne at that point would have slowed the game right down and made it really difficult for Hawthorn to get back into that match. Ironically, Hawthorn did. They slowed it down and then they were able to get the momentum. So my concern for Carlton, who I think they've got the closest defensive system to us, is their inability to control that tempo. They shouldn't have allowed Hawthorn back into that game. Similarly, in the Pies game, they 30-point lead at three-quarter time. The Cats come out fired up, had been terrible on contested ball the whole match. They score the first couple of goals. Melbourne in that moment would not have tried to score more, whereas Collingwood kept on going fast the way they'd gone the whole match. Okay, got them to a 30-point lead. They kept on trying to go fast. Melbourne would have taken the heat out of that game, and it's not as simple as just saying, we'll take the heat out just for that moment. They would have used the tempo to make suddenly 5-6 minutes goes past. It gets down to 18, but they never slowed it down, and they got rolled over the top. And you know that's I think that the advantage we've got at the moment is our ability to not just score when we've got the momentum, not just hold oppositions from scoring, but actually, like that analogy of the horse racing, control the tempo of the whole match. And I'd be really interested to ask Uze on Wednesday about that, how that plays out over the whole season, because I think a real challenge for the Collingwoods and for even for the Cats and for the Blues is that physical style that everyone's playing now, that there's the sort of go-to style is incredibly taxing. Our model is incredibly taxing as well. I think that tempo style has the advantage within the match of frustrating the opposition and being the team that actually controls how the game looks. Goodwin talks about that a lot, about the game looked how we wanted it to look. I think partly that's what he's talking about. But I think over a sweep of a full season, you can't spend all your tickets. And I think that sort of control will mean that hopefully we're not, each individual game is not as taxing as it otherwise would have been. And then come finals, that tempo, we up the tempo. And that's exactly what happened in the last 6 or 7 matches of last year's season, including the grand final, is we didn't need to worry about surging too often. We surged and then we got back. And I'm wondering whether that control or the momentum or tempo of the match is a factor in that question you asked last week, Andy, about the teams sort of getting a run on against us. Maybe that's when we've throttled it back a little bit and we've allowed that our pressure drops a little bit, but we've gone a bit into a defensive mode where we're trying to control the tempo, and that creates an opportunity for the opposition to come in and say, again, maybe that's what happened in the Essendon game. But as you say, once they did go fast, we were able to control the tempo because we could then decide whether we go slow or not. I just think it's an interesting thing to watch. And I think it's the sort of thing that takes 3-4 years to put in place, which is why I'm really bullish about where we are in terms in relation to other clubs. Brisbane are the one people are talking about. So they're probably in the same, they're probably a year ahead of us in development. So, but definitely ahead of the Collingwoods and certainly Collingwoods and Carlton for that matter.
Not sure how tactical Uze will get in his answers. I'm sure there's stuff they want to keep close to their chest, and rightly so. But yeah, I guess we can ask the question. George, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing really. We'll just motor on. I think I'll be able to back end a little bit of what Bidman said with a few of the observations about the team's performance and individuals' performance.
Fantastic. We'll move on to some positives. My positive this week is the performance of Sam Wiedemann. When the news broke that Big Benny Brown was going to be a late out after going into health and safety protocols, many a Demon fan was nervous about the prospect of him being replaced by Sam. And let's be honest, Sam's past performances haven't set the world alight. There have been some exceptions, including the incredible elimination final against the Cats where he kicked 3 goals. Some people were perplexed that Sam was even named an emergency at selection for the match, given his meagre offerings in Casey's massive win last week that saw Mitch Brown kick 7 and rookie Jacob Van Ruin kick 3. Given the Weed has been training as a relief ruckman all summer, it did make sense to have him as the emergency, as he can easily cover multiple positions as relief, including key forward and ruck, as well as allowing someone like T-Mac to go back if it's a key back that's a late out. So I can understand the selection there. Having said that, I thought Sam performed extremely well on the night, on top of a career-high 4 goals, 3 behinds, in his 50th match where he notched up his 50th goal. Sam has taken 7 marks. George, having read your match report, you weren't as glowing in your appraisal of his performance, noting that he was outbodied a number of times in contests.
Yeah, I think you've got to be very careful with Sam. We got exactly what we've seen from Sam before. He can look spectacular, but he's not going to get away with that style of play against other teams. He's excellent marks were all where he's able to run at the ball unimpeded. When he has the body on body with him, he gets too easily pushed under the ball or pushed out of the contest. So we're yet to see. It's great that he's performed that well. One of those goals was, of course, the old Joe the Goose out the back. So
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with it, but I could do that as well.
Well, where are you? You're sitting in the stands.
But yeah, you've got to be very tempered about what he's bringing to the side. I don't think he can replace Big Ben Brown. We'll talk about that later on in the thing. Can he perform the same role in the same side with T-Mac in there? I'm not sure. So we can only wait and see. He's the one who's got to be able to produce it consistently, and that's the whole point. It's no use doing it for one game.
Well, let's talk about this now. Bin Man, if Big Bad Benny Brown is back this week after not being able to train, and he'll only be able to travel on the day of the match, does Weed hold his spot? If so, do we go 3 tolls in the forward line, or does T-Mac make way? What's your feeling on what will happen at selection table if Ben Brown is able to play?
So let's say Ben Brown does go in. I've got a feeling that, let's say Ben Brown plays, but I have a feeling they won't select him. But I don't know why. I mean, if he's ready, I guess they'll play him. So let's say he's going to play. The question, I think, we know that Goodwin doesn't make changes to winning sides out of turn. That's the way he's been consistently doing it for a long time now. The sort of caveat to that is that obviously injury, and then the other caveat is that the must select players who come back in will always come back in, won't they? So when Lever's fit, he'll come back in, and so when he comes in, Tomlinson's likely to come out. Ben Brown is in that category. I'd say him, at the moment we've got Salem out of the team, Ben Brown out of the team, Lever out of the team.
Petty.
And Petty out of the team. And I think all 4 fit that category. And there's probably only 10 to 11 players who do, and there are 4 of them. All 4 will come back in. So Ben Brown comes back in, a tall's got to come out. So it's Wiedemann or T-Mac. And for me, the question is, T-Mac's been statistically down. His weakness in this match, I thought, was that he didn't do what he's generally pretty good at and bring the ball to get the ground. They probably, I don't know what the numbers were in terms of, but they had at least half a dozen intercept marks down back, I think, or at least 4 or 5.
Yeah, they took quite a few good marks.
2 or 3 against him, which is unusual. But the question that you don't see, we don't know, we don't have the numbers. It's harder to assess. I guess if watching at the ground is a bit easier, and I couldn't get to this game.
Again, Bin Man, you're going to take that membership hat off.
MCG on the weekend, but just not for the Friday night game. So for the wonderful effort by the women on the Saturday. It's the sort of thing you can't see on television. So you guys are better placed to be able to answer the question. Is the amount of running that T-Mac does. His role is to get up and down the ground, is to provide an outlet kick from the half-back flank, to mark it at 70 metres out and get it deep, to make a contest. So the question is, I think, can Weed play that role? Does he have the tank to get up and down the ground? If the answer is yes, then maybe he's fortunate and he's got his window of opportunity and it's open. It's interesting that they did choose to select him, because in many ways Mitch Brown was the obvious one, and I bet Mitch Brown would have preferred to get selected than get knocked cold in against the Bombers. So. I think T-Mac will get selected because he's played his role. He didn't have a great game on the weekend on those numbers, and probably hasn't had a great game, although he had a good game in the first week going back. There's nothing to suggest that he's not playing his role. So I think the other maxim for Goodwin is he's loath to make changes to winning teams, and he won't change players who are playing their role. If you hear him in the presser, he's pretty consistent. Player X played his role. Anyone he's asked about, it's the first thing he answers to any question about how a player performs is whether he's played his role or not. And so the question at selection will be simply that, I think. And if that means Weed gets dropped off the back of a 4-goal then so be it. And I think the context, though, that's important for that is that people might jump up and down about, well, that's not rewarding performance. Well, Mitch Brown kicked 7 goals and Wiedemann had a bloody mare the week before in the VFL. So if you're going to be consistent on rewarding performance, well, then Mitch Brown should have come in as the leading forward than Wiedemann.
Yeah, but I explained why Wiedemann was selected as an emergency. He does cover more roles, including that ruck. If we have Gawn or Jackson go into health and safety protocols, we need a guy who's been playing or training as a relief ruck. So he does cover more positions, including allowing T-Mac to go in defence and him coming in. So I can understand that. George, I know we're not in ins and outs yet, but I thought it's relevant to talk about this now.
Isn't it nice the position that we're in, that we've got options available to us? Other clubs will be going, he comes in straight away. There's no question about it. We're concerned about the excess of talent that we've got available in these areas. I'm glad I'm not on the selection panel this week, because we've got the same problem down back as we've got up forward.
We'll talk about that one later.
The other consideration with Brown is, and other teams, Goodwin alluded to it in his presser today as well, is that because of the COVID protocols, Brown actually hasn't been able to train or be with the group. The earliest he can contact the group is actually on game day. So if you're in the coaching team, you go, well, he might be in good condition. Is he ready to play, not having trained in any way since 7 days ago, or anything that was even discussed with the group in the last 5 to 6 days. So it's a great dilemma, but it's also a difficult dilemma for the club. So we can only wait and see.
The other wrinkle in the onion a little bit is that Wiedemann's best position is the lead up forward, and that's the same role that Ben Brown plays. Ben Brown gets up the ground a lot too, and I know that Wiedemann's he's looking as fit as I've ever seen him. I know he's had a great preseason. They've been training him as the sort of relief ruckman, so maybe he's got his tank up to the level. But he's at his best leading out. I think we talked about that, didn't we? He's sort of hands out in front, taking those marks. That's where he's at his best, not in the one-on-one sort of grappling. And just another thing about Tommy Mack, I watched the replay, half of it, and a couple of his goals came from Tommy Mack blocking. And that's what Tom McDonald does, and that's the sort of role play. You don't get anything for that. You don't even get probably a 1%er on the stats sheet for that. But his first goal was purely because, it was enabled because Tom McDonald didn't fly for it. He sort of went up with a half effort to not give the free kick away, and creates space. And that's the role he plays for Ben Brown as well. So it'll be interesting to see which rein they pull.
Yeah, I think both Goodwin and Hardwick were a bit they're sort of questioning their health and safety protocols, whether they need to continue and sort of come into line with the rest of society. I guess if you're only having to isolate if you have symptoms, so I guess that might be looked at the AFL because
that's not the case yet in Victoria, though, is it?
No.
Yeah, so I don't know what Goodwin's on about there.
I thought from April 1st, or have they changed that? Unless you're a close
first joke, mate.
I thought you're only a close contact. Well, I thought the close contact.
As far as I know, it's 7 days for a close contact. And
there was talk about it changing, but
so it didn't change.
Jana Pulford came out today and said it's not changing from the state government, but
Can someone break that to my wife?
Maybe we'll get Goody to ring her up.
The other thing that sits in the background is that the state governments did a lot of work in the background with the AFL to make sure that the AFL played on last year to everybody's benefit, and they're a little bit owing to the state government, so they don't need people making commentary about state government decisions in the media. So both Hardwick and Goodwin probably got a quiet text from Jill McLaughlin this afternoon.
So I wonder with Ben Brown whether they might use the cover of the COVID, so to speak. It sounds a bit sort of spy bill, but to give him an out and to not make a change and say, look, he hasn't had the opportunity. We're going to keep him in Melbourne, because then it sort of delays the thing for 1 week, but it gives Weed another opportunity and maybe put some pressure on Tom McDonald as well.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on from that. George, your positives, talk about the systems and the Wingers Club, or?
Yeah, we'll talk about the systems in particular. There was another comment. I'd really encourage people to listen to Goodwin's media, both after the game and during the week. You pick up snippets in there which really give you some insight into what the club and the players and the coaches are really thinking. And this week he made this very small comment: if we play that way, we grind teams down. It was all about the systems in place and the way that it's played. Now, let's face it, this side was really flat this week. And as Binman said before, it's on the back of a 6-day break and also the Gold Coast. I don't think people understand how sapping that game was because of the humidity. And Gold Coast really took it up to us, yet we still managed to get over the line. But it really would have drained the players. They were exhausted at the end of that match. So it's not surprising that, right across the ground, there were a whole series of players who simply didn't turn up on the night. They were just running on air. Even Neil Bullen, who runs all night, managed the grand total of 10 possessions. That's not his game. Other players barely got a touch, it would seem. All the hard-running players really suffered in this game. So the systems held up, and these systems are still holding up, despite the fact that we're still missing the Levers and the Petties and the Hibbards and the Salems in the back line. So they only scored 70 points, which was just a little bit more than our average giveaway of 60-odd points, I think 60 to 64 points. So everything that we did held up really well. For me, that was a real sharp contrast to what Essendon was putting up. I didn't detect any real systems in place there. They're one of these young developing teams that's got a lot of talent, but it's all individual work that's going on. There's not much teamwork effort going into the way they play. They've certainly got the players. So you'd have to ask why Rutten hasn't introduced those sort of systems to a young team in the same way that Goodwin has introduced them into our team. I kept noticing, for example, even though we talked about this last year in particular, contested possessions out of the middle or clearances out of the middle. Every time we were getting them, it goes forward. Every single time I saw an Essendon player come out of the middle, the ball went to the half-forward flank. It didn't come out cleanly. That's because of our systems stopping them doing that sort of stuff. The back line we've talked about again and again, and I think there were some beautiful examples of a system falling apart in the Richmond St Kilda game this week. Everyone went and wet their pants over the performance of Ben King up forward. He kicked 5 goals, I think something ridiculous in the last quarter. Not one of those goals occurred after Dylan Grimes went off, and the whole Richmond back line fell apart. They only got one kick at goal, and that was I think it was Bolton with 18 seconds to go, and he scored a goal. But their whole system fell apart because they took away that vital cog in the system. Their systems have been severely depleted over the years, and they've only got the remnants left over from their premierships. But for us, our systems are holding up, and we've got people to back them up. We've got people fighting for places. Where do we put Tomlinson? Where do we put Smith? Where do we put Hibbert? Where do we put these other players when they come back and are available? So, really impressed with the systems that we've got that are holding up really well across the whole ground.
Just on the Heat, the the Gold Coast against Giants similarly looked completely spent. They were a complete shell of the team against the D's. They never got out of first gear in that match. And again, I think it's a factor of that humidity.
Yeah, definitely. Big man, you want to talk about, I've got here Gus, and who do you tag conundrum that other teams face with us?
Well, the real positive for me was Gus. I just thought it was a fantastic game. I know that Oliver got the highlights, but I thought, I was really curious about the role Gus was playing from looking at the television. He seemed to be halfback flanker, but George, you were saying that he was where he was still playing wing but dropping back, or starting at 6-6-6 in the halfback flank, or
well, he wasn't starting on the wing. That was Jordan.
Yeah, he'd start in the 6-6-6 back at the halfback flank, but he was certainly playing the winger role. Now, I'm not sure what's going on, and I'd encourage Demon Landers to have a look at the next game as to the setup. The coach, Goodwin's mentioned a couple of times in his media conferences talking about the back seven. Now, how that's being done is obviously by dropping someone like Brayshaw back into the back line at times, but I'm not quite sure how it's working. I've only noticed it in the last two games. I don't know whether that enables, for example, Jordan to come on the ground and play as an extra mid. Brayshaw can certainly play as an extra mid, but he's sitting at the half-back line. But not as a mid, but as a pseudo-mid sort of thing. I just can't quite work out what's going on with the placements. But he stands at the half-back flank at the 6-6-6 situation. But I'm not sure that that's a pure half-back flanker role at all.
But he must have played like almost in some respects a traditional halfback flanker, because often he was on the same side of the ground as Langdon. So
yeah.
Either way, I thought his positioning was fantastic. His 20 marks were, not all, some of them were, chips, but, he read the ball well. His hands have been great this year. I thought his leadership was fantastic. And he was, he also his way, in some respects filled the role that Lever does in keeping the shape down back and telling people where to stand and being that central player, particularly because May was dragged back deep and starting in the square against Wright. And so I thought his leadership was fantastic. His kicking was solid. I love it when he's kicking off his left foot as well. I think the best game he's played for the club, and he was every bit as influential as Oliver. Oliver was brilliant, and Oliver has been so terrific last season and this season at getting depth off his kicking, and he's sort of his first go-to now is to kick long when he gets the chance. But yeah, I thought Gus was every bit as influential, and I'll be really interested to see what the coaches vote, what votes he gets for that.
They were released today. Oliver got the 10. Here they are. Just bear with me. They bring it up. Oliver 10, Brayshaw 8, Wiedemann 4, Wright 4, Langdon 4.
Right. So that's probably a good spread. But Gus 8, I wonder if he's ever got 8 before, when the last time. But yeah, I just thought it was a terrific game. And on the positive side, the conundrum of the opposition's face is that, I'm with George. There's no way that Petrarca wasn't sort of at least a bit proppy, or, I think Goodwin's interesting, George. You're right. If he's now an interesting combination in his pressers of some really interesting, revealing comments about our thinking and our strategy. So, for instance, his comment that we were happy to have as many, even missing shots, because we had so many inside 50s, and that's how they want to play, because then they trap it down there. But then, in the next breath, he says track was okay. He probably was okay, but he was definitely feeling it. But also, he mentioned in that presser that the way they used him was interesting. So he played a slightly defensive role, and maybe that was clever. But the opposition have to work out, well, what do you do? To put a player to Oliver and track gets off the chain, or vice versa? Both so damaging in slightly different ways. Oliver is just incredible when the ball hits the ground. And just as a sort of continuing thread from positives is sort of props to Viney as well. He's been his best start to the season, I think, for his best start to a season for probably in his career. He looks really good. He's running over the ground well, and his kicking has been terrific, as we talked about last week. He's making good decisions, not going for too much. He hit up some nice targets on his left foot. So when you've got him playing at a higher level and you've got Track and Oliver, you're spoiled for riches, and you can also throw Viney onto one of their more damaging players, or as as Goodwin seemed to be suggesting, you can mix and match and have Petrarca playing a more defensive role. Having said all that, the Petrarca goal in the first quarter, I think it was it the first quarter he kicked that goal, was just pure class, wasn't it?
Yep.
Just he's such a good footballer that we really are blessed to have that quality of players right through the team. But certainly in my time of following the D's, there's probably nothing that comes close to that midfield.
And then you have someone like Harms, who bobs up for 2 goals. I thought had a good game too.
He had a really good game. And just on Gus, is that he really reminded me on Friday night of one of my all-time favourite players in the way he moved, but also his sort of influence on the game. He really reminded me of Glenn Lovett, that physical, dependable, goes back with a flight, wins his hard balls, and he would have come. That was a pretty big hit he cop last week, Brayshaw, and I know he's okay, but still, he didn't get in the head, which is great. But he would have felt, in addition to all of the humidity and just being tired from the previous week and the 6-day break, he would have been pretty sore and come up from it. So.
Let's move on to some areas of improvement. I was extremely disappointed with the crowd size for a marquee game on a Friday night. The weather conditions were not an impediment, despite a little bit of drizzle. And I get that COVID is still an issue, keeping away a section of people from attending crowded events and getting on crowded public transport. However, 45,000 people for 2 Victorian teams on a Friday night is very, very poor. When you consider Geelong Collingwood on Saturday night attracted 53,000, Carlton Hawthorn on Sunday afternoon attracted 66,000. Look, they're all teams that are travelling very well at the moment, and I don't buy that Essendon fans are staying away as a result of the 0-2 start to the season. It's too early to jump off the bandwagon yet, maybe from next week. So who didn't turn up? Can either of you guys guess to the crowd split? I could be Manuel there, but I find it hard to judge based on the roar after a goal, because to me the Essendon roar sounded louder. But I don't know if that is as a result of me being on the opposite side of the ground. I don't know how the acoustics work in the MCG. Perhaps when you're amongst the cheering of your own goals, you don't get the full effect of how loud your section of the crowd is. In any event, I was bitterly disappointed. We're the reigning premiers. If we want to be taken seriously in the AFL world, we want to be given marquee games and marquee time slots, then we need our supporters to get off their asses and get to games. Otherwise, we'll be watching Carlton every Friday night. But George, do you have any idea what you think the split might have been from the crowd?
My guess would be 50-50.
So is that disappointing then, for Melbourne's point of view?
Yes and no. You can always expect a reasonable crowd to turn up for Essendon. In any case, they've got a sizable membership, and they play a good number of games at the MCG. The MCC members' statistics about which team they support are almost identical, I think, Melbourne to Essendon. So I suspect the split was exactly that, 50-50 over that side of the ground. And there on the southern side of the ground, there was an awful lot of seats in the public areas that were occupied by Essendon people. So the numbers, it's difficult to judge. I think the Carlton-Hawthorn game, I'd be interested to know how many Carlton supporters are there. I suspect of the 66,000, there are probably 50,000 Carlton supporters.
They're up and about.
Yeah, they are up and about because they've got hope and aspiration at the moment. So that's not surprising. I think overall the numbers are down, and that was proven in the first round. There's a lot of people still out there, not us mad idiots, who will go to the game under any circumstances.
Well, not been man.
Not been man. But there are a good number of people who are still concerned, particularly the older supporters, still concerned about COVID, and it is still out there in the community, and you really don't want to get it. So going to a crowded situation isn't the most desirable. Look, the target that the club set was to get an average of 50,000 at home games.
We're at that now.
We're at that now. So we can build on that in the future, but we can't expect everything to suddenly turn around in the space of 1 year after winning a premiership. It takes years and years of consistent performances to get your crowds up.
Well, we've got our record membership now, 55,000 so far, and possibly should climb a little bit from that. Hopefully we can get another 5,000, but we'll get close to 60.
Yeah.
I think, Andy, the metrics change. So, I mean, Geelong, Collingwood are up and about. You know, they were shooting for their third win. Geelong have won their, they're looking good, and they've got a big supporter base. They only got 53,000 on a perfect day of the MCG. Friday night, cold. I think I just think that everyone's got to reset, including the AFL. That's the messaging they should, they want big crowds, but people, as George said, it's just, you're getting 10,000 COVID cases a day. People aren't going to want to go to the footy. But there's also the practicality on any given day of there's 10,000 people contracting COVID. Well, that's maybe 100,000 people who are suddenly, or 50,000 people who are in isolation they've just discovered and can't go to the footy, like me in the first round. So that's going to always have be a factor, I think. So I think that, that if at all this season, the numbers won't get back to where they might have been historically till near the end of the season when, maybe we're in spring and the COVID cases have gone down. So I just think that, I think things have changed with that, and everyone's got KO, I guess, or sort of access. And if you're umming and ahhing and, you end up staying home. So I just think that's the way the world.
I was busting just before 3/4 time, busting for the bathroom, and ran in, and there was this guy sitting on the couches in the area behind where I am watching the game on KO. So, it's on right out there.
Right.
He must have been a bit cold.
Yeah, the other thing that might be a consideration, and particularly for Friday night's games, is the city's devoid of office workers at the moment. And will be for a long time. I heard something like only 15% of offices are occupied in the city. It's just incredible. So people who used to go to work, go after work, have a couple of beers and head to the game no matter who was playing, they're just not there. And that's the difference between, maybe another 2,000 to 5,000 people coming through the gate.
Yeah, I guess neutral supporters staying away.
Yeah.
But also then you've got, if you're not already in the city and you're coming from home, maybe you don't want to get the train in. And so, that's a really good point. I've been working back in the city a couple of days a week, and it is, it's a changed place, that's for sure.
George, you got goal kicking and Hunt and A&B. We talked a bit about goal kicking, so unless there's anything else you want to add, you can. Yeah,
it sounds like beating a broken drum in this case, isn't it? Andy covered most of it in the introduction. It's just the same again. When we've got the opportunity to really put sides away, particularly in the first quarter, this week I counted 5 set shot misses. Now, only one of those, which was Fritsch's, was from the 50-metre line. Everything else was inside 50.
And pretty in the corridor.
Yep.
25 metres out in front, Wiedemann missed. it's just and the other ones were sort of again 25 to 30 metre shots and missed. If we get those 5 instead of being 3 goals 5 in the first quarter or 8 goals,
Game's
8 goals
over.
1 sort of, and the game is over. Yeah, absolutely, completely over. Even then, we sort of struggled on a bit. We were 4 goals. We were actually 4 goals 10 until Harms kicked his two goals to put us back in front and keep us in front. But 4 goals 10. It's going to come back and bite you unless we can improve this. I don't know what can be done about it. It's just the set shot kicking. I just don't know what can be done about it. But if it improves, if we kick accurately like we did in the grand final, we saw what we're capable of. We just blow teams away completely. But if we continue with this, we're going to open the opportunities for some team at some point.
I think the rest of our kicking has improved, as in field kicking. So
field kicking's much, much better. Yeah. So, would like to see that.
One sec, B-Man, did you want to add anything there?
Oh, I did. Yeah, it's frustrating. We missed some dead easy ones this week, and it was like, they went through a patch. You think, well, Wright's gone back and slotted it.
He was kicking everything
and until that last one. So, like if we kick, like I was saying with my sort of horse racing analogy, our ability to get in front then surge is incredible. Like that's probably the most exciting thing about watching the Ds these days, is that when we decide to click it up a bit and surge and increase our rating, we can be devastating, but that's where if we're accurate, we can be super devastating. So we take full advantages of those 5-6 minutes where they consciously seem to go harder. Then I don't think any team can stick with us in that period. So, but you got to kick them, don't you? You've got to put them through, as we did in the end. So we came good in the end, and we kicked pretty accurately near the end of the game, and suddenly we get out to a 30-point lead, or 30-point win. So
there's the
not 19 points as you had in your match report.
Yeah,
George,
sorry.
You shaved. You gave us a haircut there.
Yeah. There's the accuracy police on their way.
That's right.
That's good that somebody's reading it.
Yeah, someone pulled me up on that on social media.
Oh,
I didn't dob you in.
It was a typo.
Typo, though. That's always the way. If you make a mistake, typo, sorry.
Yeah.
Just before
autocorrect.
George finishes up his negative, I might jump in with my negative, because I think, George, you speak to this point that I thought the negative was...
they're improvements, not negative.
An improvement. That's right. Sorry, Andy. That's
trying to be positive here.
There's no prize for fourth these days.
None.
The improvement was that they seemed to flood back, apparently. I couldn't see that on the thing. You guys will have seen it at the ground, but which I thought was really unusual. I thought Essendon were putting in place a system, George, which is why I had them on the rise, but they seemed to default to a very defensive mindset right from the get-go, and made it flooded back, made it really hard for us to clag up our forward line, which is not the mentality of a winning sort of team, but I guess that's also a function of fearing going down 3-0 against the juggernaut. But is they scored 50% of the times they went inside 50, and that was the response to what Goody said. He was asked that question, and that was when he said, well, we're happy with the number of inside 50 because that's how we want to play, which was a funny answer to that question, because it they're not quite the same things. But I think that's definitely an improvement. That was unusually high. They scored 70 points for a team that was pretty defensive for the whole match. They got to 70 points, which is, above that 60-point threshold that we like to keep teams under. 50% is a pretty high rating, of a better team with those things when we lose that match. And then sort of related bit was the space that Wright had to lead into. And I know, George, that you were going to I thought that was unusual. That looked funny. And Gus played a a role, and no lever. That's the thing about having lever and Petty in the team. They take turns zoning off and filling that space and making it really difficult. But it really stood out a couple of those leads were pretty much straight up the ground where he had a big pocket of space to move into. That was one sort of improvement. And again, the issue that you flagged was 6 out of 7 goals again. So, sorry, George, I just knew that you were sort of going to touch on them. So,
go take it away, George.
Yeah, we'll bring this out next week when we talk about zone defence. And I think what Bin Man observed was the same as at the ground. It wasn't just Wright. Stringer also got a couple of opportunities doing exactly the same thing, leading into these gaps which were left. Now, the problem that I saw was that people like Hunt and Neil Bullen weren't playing zone defence. They were guarding grass or trying to guard a player. And a couple of times you'll notice on the replay, they're looking sideways at where did Wright come from. Well, he's just run straight past you because you should be standing off your man to deny him if the ball was going to be kicked to him, but also to deny the corridor. That didn't happen on the Bowie side, for example. It's all about your placement and learning how to play in a zone defence in exactly the same way as you do in basketball. You have to move. You don't stand still. You have to cover your teammates. And in a couple of cases, I'm afraid Jaden's let players get far too loose. And this week it was not covering off the space in front of the leading forward. So when we talk about who might go out next week, I think we've got we've certainly got one candidate, I think, who might find himself on the outer.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one later. I thought he had a pretty good game, actually, Honey. I take your point. I mean, I think that's his... Yeah, I take your point. But I do think that it showed a bit finally having our back, 3 of our stars out of our defensive back half. That's got to be a factor. And Nibbler, I mean, it's a bit tough on him. I mean, at one point I thought he could have gone back in the hole, but he would have got smashed.
Yeah, but that's the job. But they won't kick it into the hole if he's standing there.
Yeah,
that's the whole point.
I mean, I think, you bring Salem, Petty and Lever back in.
Yeah, because they know where to place themselves and stop that opportunity being created. And the other thing that the fans in the crowds they come out and say, May had a terrible game. There's nothing you can do about a player who's leading into uncontested space. No backman can stop that sort of thing. It's a zone defence. It means that everybody has to pull their weight. May's role is completely different. It's not to stop a leading forward. That's the job of the guys who are sitting out at the half forward line.
And on May, he had in the first quarter when really, again, we could have been, what was it? It's 3-5 at the end of that quarter. Easily could have been 5-2. We could have put the game to bed, as you suggested. He was fantastic in that quarter. He had 10 disposals, 90% disposal efficiency, and took a fantastic contested mark. So, as you say, Wright got him on the lead a couple of times, but you leave a channel for a forward to run into, and you're not going to. Same with Benny Brown. No one's going to stop, or Wiedemann for that matter. He got his mark on the lead, which was a magnificent drilling kick from Oliver.
Yep.
Had a huge opening lane in front of him, which, the Essendon defensive coach would have been bemoaning exactly the same thing we were just talking about. It's how, in modern footy, it's so rare for forwards to have sort of an extended lane to when it's not a 6-6-6 situation. So, it was, but 50%, 52%, I think it was, for disposals inside 50. That's for inside 50s. That's high. So, I think we've done well, but looking forward to when Petty gets back in the side, Lever gets back in the side, and the Salo's back. So.
All right, let's go talk as we head into the ins and outs. We'll quickly go on to the Casey game. I didn't get to watch it this week. I was watching my nephew debut for his seniors for his club. But I was following along the scores and had my heart in my mouth, praying for the full-time indicator to tick over. In the lead up to the match, Casey lost most of its goal-kicking arsenal in Wiedemann, Van Ruin, and then Brown cops a knock early and he's out for the rest of the match. Casey ended up holding off the Bombers by 3 points in a nail-biter. Bim Man, did you watch it?
I watched the first quarter, which is on. You can now watch it on demand,
Yep.
which is terrific. So I watched the first quarter, and the two commentators were something else. I actually thought that the commentators were pretty good on the weekend, but maybe that was because I caught a bit of that commentary. But
they picked up a couple of guys from the Essendon cheer squad.
Yeah. I thought Howes, he moved super well. So the rumours of his ascent was obviously well off the mark. So I don't think he'll come in either. I really like the way Dawes going about his footy. I know that he's not coming in until the touch wood, unless there's a injury to someone. But his attitude. Other one was Melksham. Took a couple of big hits, tackled hard. He looked like someone who's playing with a level of intensity. I'm not sure how. So I only watched the first quarter, so I'm not sure how that panned out. I know from the numbers.
I think he only finished with 7, didn't he?
Sorry?
He only finished with 7 touches or something.
Oh, did he? Well, it must have all been in that, right. Yeah. The one that had the big numbers was Oscar Baker. Had a good game off the halfback flank, it would seem. So did you see the game, George?
No, I just watched the first quarter and like you, looked through the stats to see. But yeah, Oscar Baker led the way for the team in terms of disposals. So it'll be interesting to see how good they were.
Mm.
Well, it doesn't seem like anyone will be from the twos will be getting a game yet. So
Bedford was impressive from the
Bedford played well again from just looking at the stats.
Well, he's more likely to come in as a medical sub, I would say, at the moment.
Yeah. He was a medical sub, wasn't he, again?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So he will be again, you'd think.
And so ins and outs. Look, Goody has indicated at the presser at the end of the match, he indicated both Brown and Lever would be available this week. We've spoken about Brown, but I guess Lever is the other one to talk about if he is available this week, and who knows, because every week it just seems to get pushed back, but I can only take Goody on his word to say Lever is available this week. Now that Lever being available throws up another conundrum, this time in our back half. Both Tomlinson and Smith have been impressive. Man, you mentioned that Lever's one of those guys who's a walk-up straight in, so who makes way for the All-Australian Premiership defender in Lever?
I don't think Lever will come back in. I'm not sure. Sort of Goody was on a bit of a tear there, but he was still a couple of weeks away in the injury report last week. I can't see. I don't think Lever will play.
Yeah, it was 1 to 2 weeks last week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think he will play, but if he does, Tomlinson will come out. I'm sure of it. I mean, Smith has done everything asked of him, and I think getting back to your comment, George, about that sort of defensive hole, part of the issue is Tomlinson is a one-on-one player, and he's not zoning off the way even Smith is, or certainly Petty. Smith is so much more athletic than Tomo at the moment. And that's super important in his own defence, because sometimes you're going to get caught out and you need to get across to a contest or to block up a hole or to stop a leading lane. And if you're 30, 40 metres away, the only way you're going to get to some of those contests is you've got the wheels to get there. I thought Tomo did some okay things. He got outmarked a few times last week, I thought, against the Suns, even though I thought he had a good game, and he did some serviceable things. But he's a shoulder-to-shoulder defender, and Smith is a much more sort of aggressive ability to zone off, and he got up the ground a lot more. I think he gets up and down, and he's got that leap. A few times he gets over the top of packs and just smashes it, spikes it over the boundary line. There's sort of a combination of skill sets that Tomo can't match, and I think that Tomo's the logical one out for Lever when Lever does come back in. But to be honest, I'd be surprised if Lever plays this week.
I think we just have to take Goody at his word, because he's basically said he's available and coming back this week. But I agree, Smith I don't see any possibility that he's going to be dropped out. He gets to contests that others just would not get to, which when you're playing a zone defence is absolutely critical. You've got to come off your man, like Lever does so beautifully.
Yeah.
You've got to come off your man to get to the contest or to intercept, and Smith does that brilliantly. Like I said, Hunt's the one that I think has got a real cloud over him. There's a number of players who can play that type of role if needed. Jordan, for example, would be another one that could slot down there if needed. Bowie's got the other side well and truly locked up. But Jaden had a nightmare the previous week, and I don't think he embellished his case this week.
No, I thought he played all right. I mean, he's best when he's running and carrying, I think. So it's playing to his strengths. I think if he plays at that level, he's in till either Hibbo or Salo comes back, I think. So I can't see, it's not good his MO to make an unnecessary change down there. He will say quite rightfully, well, he's part of a backline that's, been every bit as miserly as last year's backline. So, I thought he did a couple of nice things, but taking your point about his defensive positioning. On the injury front, Andy, I got schooled by Weber during the week on the realities of difficulty being accurate with. So I've completely changed my tune. So I've gone off Essendon being a team on the rise. I've definitely, I'm all aboard the Carlton Express. Hawthorn, who I bagged, they're on the thingo, and I make a lot of comment about injuries, and I get shot down there by someone who's obviously more qualified than my vibe energy. So
I like what was suggested is that instead of giving the length, the 1 to 2, because as we've seen with Petty, he was 3 to 4 6 weeks ago, and he's now just come down to 2 to 3. And I bet you he's 2 to 3 again when we later in the week or whenever we see the thing again, or just. But I like the suggestion that was made that I think Richmond do is call it short term, medium term, long term, intermediate. I think that might be better for someone like you. But then again, even that is subject to someone being on the medium term or the short term for long term. So.
No, I reckon. And then the other, I think it was our PFC was suggestion, and it was that combined with what was the name? Combined with which group they're training in. So are they in the rehab group? Are they back with the main training, or are they're doing their own thing and whatever? To me, if those two bits of information would be enough, that's all I'd need in order to have some ability to make my own assessment of where they are on that path back to the team. At the moment, it's all over the shop. So,
well, you'll be happy to know Picket Fence was at training today, and he said Petty was training with the main group and didn't look hampered by any injury. So he was listed last week as 2 to 3, which means now he's 1 to 2 maybe. And training unhampered.
It's been going down to training, but I would prefer more sophisticated reporting from the club about likelihood of players coming back. But that's good. That is very good news. I meant to say this last week. While I mentioned Weber, I was a proud owner of one of his triptychs. I think, is that how you say it? The painting of the photo, print of the photo of Viney picking up Viney, and Gus is in there somewhere too, wrapped around there. So it's a brilliant picture, and I finally got it home, and it's been brilliantly framed, and I shout out to Hang Up. I got it framed on the way down to the Casey game, and Hang Up down at Fountain Gate. Done a magnificent job. It looks absolutely magnificent, and I'm just about to hang it in the TV room for all the games I have to watch out and can't get to the game. But yeah, it just looks fantastic. So when I've got it on the wall, I'll put a picture on Demonland, and as I say, Hang Up did a fantastic job framing it, and it just looks magnificent. So
Hang Up, of course, is owned by Demonland's own Joe Boy. Am I correct?
Correct.
Found a gay free plug, or actually you can pay us for that one, Joe Boy.
And Ben Man, I'd trust Demonland track watchers over anything that comes out through the media or even from the club about injuries.
And all power. Picket Fence's reports have been super, super entertaining, and good on him too.
Yeah. But when players are back training with the main group, when they haven't got the pink or green jackets on, indicating they've got some sort of injury, you can be sure that they're not all that far away. I think the only thing that would hold any of these, both Lever and Petty at the moment, is about their conditioning, whether it's up and ready to go. So,
Lever did do a full pre-season. He only sort of got injured just on the eve of the season. Petty was a few weeks before the season started, but would have done most of a pre-season. All right, let's get on to our opposition watch. When I see a highly touted premiership hope sitting at 0-3 with the prospect of a season-ending 0-4 start, I understandably get very nervous. George, are we simply playing a bottom 4 team that will easily account for and send them packing for season 22? Or are we stepping into the dragon's den, poking the belly of a wounded beast who is ready to strike their first blood for the year?
We are definitely playing a bottom 4 side. There's no doubt about that. Whether they deserve it at the moment after 3 rounds, we're yet to find out. Look, I think Port are in a world of pain, mainly because I think of their playing list. They've been dependent on successful outcomes for a number of years from this older group of players that they've got, the Robbie Grays, the Boakes, and a whole stack of other ones who are highly talented but they're just not players, but they're just not on the ground at the moment, and not having the same sort of effect. The other real thing that's affecting them at the moment is their injuries. They're missing Charlie Dixon up forward.
Is he back this week? No.
He is a test.
Who knows with injuries?
So who knows? Yeah, who knows? But he's a test and has been for some while. So I don't know how the Port Adelaide supporters would agree with Binman's ideas about dates. So they're in a worse situation perhaps than what we are. Charlie Dixon's out. May come back this week. Robbie Gray is exactly the same. A test. He's one of their major performers up forward. They had no Aaliyah. He's out for another 4 to 5 weeks. No Mitch Cleary, who's their fullback. No Orazio Fantasia, who's again another small forward match winner for her. Their fullback last week, Skinner, was injured with an ankle injury and was subbed out in the third quarter. So you can see they're missing fullbacks, full forwards, a lot of good players around the ground that they've depended on for a number of years. They're just not available. So short of some miracles occurring prior to Thursday night, they're going to be in the same situation. They were playing Adelaide this week. Adelaide have got an appalling list, absolutely appalling, and yet they managed to roll them to get over the top. So yes, Porter in a world of pain. I can't see them getting up sufficiently, particularly after losing that game. I think they'll be scarred by that game in the same way that we've damaged the Bulldogs and probably a few other teams on the way to our premiership. I don't have a great deal of time for Ken Hinkley. I saw him do some awful things with the team last year. There were obviously things that needed to be changed on game day, and he did nothing. But there will be plenty of Ports fans probably agreeing with me on that line. His job is really on the line at this stage. I'm not worried about the wounded beast. It's just the lack of talent that they've got on the field, and we've got without a decent back line, they're not going to be able to hold our forward line. Todd Marshall kicked 5 goals for them last week. Up forward, that's one player who Stephen May will account for very, very easily on his own, regardless of anybody else. So they're going to really struggle to get a score on the board that's going to get them over the line.
Just a couple of things to add to that, George. I reckon there's a couple of really big flashing red lights, alarms, whatever. I just now need the alarm to come past for the effects at Port. And two things is that defensively they're quite a strong, under Hinkley they've been quite a strong footy team. They've considered to have a good defence, but they haven't got a good defensive system. Their defence is their ability to play tough man-on-man footy. and they never really have developed that sort of zone defence, and particularly the one Melbourne have done with that, the way it's so fluid. And so they haven't got that. But they've been pretty good defensively, a bit like GWS. They play good man-on-man footy when they're on. But the two flashing bits of or the flashing light concerns I'd have is Port, because they both point to the same problem, which is not so much a lack of talent, but a significant drop in effort, because any defensive system, modern footy requires all players to be switched on and doing a lot of running, a lot of disciplined running, is that they're like number 18 or something in the league for scores conceded from the back half. Hawthorn just destroyed them from the back half in a number that actually is a really rare number now. Is most clubs, like Melbourne, we're incredibly difficult for teams to transition and move it down the ground. We set up so well ahead of the ball, as Richo keeps saying, and behind the ball. And but Hawthorn in the week before were like a knife through butter. That was, to me, that's a lack of that's a real lack of defensive gut running, which speaks to a mind thing. And then defensively, like last week, even at the end of that game, they were leaving, speaking of lanes, they were leaving all sorts of spaces back there, which means that their half-back flankers, their half-forward flankers, their mids weren't pushing back hard, which again is in a crucial must-win game, you can't go down 3-0. That speaks to their heads not quite in the game. That's an effort-based thing. I take your point about the who they have on the park, but with a reasonable effort level, they should have won that game. I watched the second half; they were in control of it. They missed. That was a good example, Andy, of the problems of missing gettable shots at goal. That's what cost them in the end. They should have put that game to bed, but I'd be really worried if I was Port fans, because their intensity is down. And the other one is for under Hinkley. I mean, again, as I talked about at the top, the big thing at the moment is contested footy. Everyone, Collingwood number one contested footy in the AFL at the moment. And you can see it on the ground. It's infectious. Port of mid-table now. Like a top four contender isn't mid-table in contested ball differential. So that again speaks to a psychological sort of thing. The question I'd have if I was a fan is, are we up for the fight? And the answer at 3-0 would have to be not. And what a horror for them to come back to be playing Melbourne. Melbourne will be psyched for this match. Not that we aren't for any match, but I think that there'll be games where I'll be interested to see whether there will be games where we don't play as much tempo footy and we look to surge and put teams away. And I get the feeling there are a couple of clubs that we don't like, and Port's one of them. So maybe we'll surge in this game and put them to bed for good.
Yes, I hope so. Let's move on. Our women's team into their first ever AFLW Grand Final. The Demons made history in the first AFLW match played at the MCG, and after a slow start, they were very impressive and took a nice lead before almost squandering it and fighting it out until the final siren. George, do you want to give us a quick review of that match before we preview the upcoming Grand Final against Adelaide? And Big Man,
sure.
You can chime in as well.
And I'd encourage people to have a look at the great write-up on the match by Dees in October, who's been contributing to the AFLW reports on Demon Land. It was quite concise, not concise, it was quite extensive and a really good analysis of what went on. First thing that impressed me was we had a crowd of 6,400 there, which compared very favourably with the 4,000 people who turned up for the Suns GWS game. I think the AFL need to be really concerned about the amount of money that they're throwing at these two sides when, after quite a number of years for both of them, they can only manage 4,000 people to come and watch. Real concerns. Anyhow, back to the AFLW. Great game. Real nail biting in the end, and believe me, Brisbane were a better side, but our systems held up much better than theirs. We changed a number of things in the way that we played from what we've been playing in previous games, and indeed during the whole season, which were to our advantage in the end. It was a a brutal game, as it was described. It was very physical. One of the things that I did notice that I personally have been asking for a long time is moving Daisy up the ground. In a lot of the earlier games, she was sitting in the goal square doing very little and was moved into defence when things were getting desperate. In this game, she moved a long way up the ground. She was at the half-back line and even in the middle at times, not for the ball ups, but just using her superior capabilities around the ground, which we haven't been using to full advantage, I think, previously. And she was able to get the ball on a number of occasions that others weren't, and that we haven't. Similarly, Taylor Harris, who's been fantastic during the whole season, was starved of opportunities, firstly because of the conditions. It was wet, it was slippery, almost a constant drizzle during the game. She depends on getting the ball in high and using her superior marking ability. Well, that just never happened during the game. You would have seen that Elisa Bannon got 3 goals basically by kicking through the pack in one case, but running in the open because the ball was kicked into the open. So that was the other important change that I think we saw in this game. We've stopped doing these silly ring around a rosy handball type of games to keep possession. We kick the ball long, and when it goes over the back to someone like Elisa Banner with her speed, you get goals. Karen Paxman was fantastic. If you look at who started the chain for Elisa's goals, it was Karen Paxman. Gets it forward. It's different from the men's game, and people have to understand this. If someone kicks the ball forward into a pack in the men's game, that's likely it's going to be marked or picked off by the opposition. It doesn't happen in the girls' games. There's very few players can mark overhead. Taylor Harris is the extraordinary exception. The result is the ball comes to the ground, and it's a contested situation again. So you can force the ball forward, but you've got to start by kicking the ball forward in the first place. You were reminded of all these people who sit in the ground in years gone by saying, just kick it in the men's game. But in the women's game, it's more needed than what it is in the men's game. The men's is all about possession and territory these days. You've got to get down the ground. So we changed the way that we played, which was great, and it worked. It worked against the superior side. Lauren Pearce in the middle was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic in the ruck. She is a huge positive us, and snatching it out of a ball up in the forward pocket to score that goal on her behalf was critical at the time. Eden Zanker, unfortunately, is still carrying that quad injury. She's still hobbling in a big way, and she's our backup ruck, and she just wasn't able to get off the ground. And even after the game, she was really struggling to move. So hopefully she'll be a little bit better next week. The problem we've got, are we going to talk about next week a little bit, Andy?
Sorry there, I had myself on mute. Yeah, we will talk about. We'll do
Look, I think it's going to be a great game next week. The problem is Adelaide, as has been noted before, they are the South Australia state side. They've got the best of all the girls in South Australia. Victoria's split between, 8 teams at the moment, or 9 teams. So the talent's a lot more thinly spread. We've got a good range of talent, and that's why we're in the grand final. But boy, is it a big ask coming up against Adelaide. They're players like Chelsea Randall and Hatchard and Phillips and Antonio and Marinoff are all big, solid, reliable players. I don't know that we can match them in the same way physically, but we've got to be able to tactically outdo them. We lost to them earlier in the year, but so we've seen the best of them. We know what we're up against, which is good. And the other fortunate thing is we've got a full range of players to choose from effectively. So it'll be a cracker of a game. Like the men, kicking goals will be critical to this. If they get those first goals, either side gets a bit of a lead. It's almost impossible to drag it back because of the low scores that inevitably happen in the women's side. So we'll keep the fingers crossed. We'd like to see 2 premierships in the space of 8 months or thereabouts. That'll be fantastic, and we can always hope for 3 premierships inside 12 months.
2 in a calendar year.
Yep.
I reckon our path to victory next week. I've got a bit of a slightly different take, George. I thought you were right the way we played for territory. I really liked it. I went to the game and it was fantastic. It was just great to be at the G and see the women, particularly after they won, come to the, spend really meaningful time on the ground and engage with the fans. And you could see a number of the players had friends and family there. It was just a terrific energy afterwards, and so meaningful for only Daisy and Taylor had played on the MCG at all in that whole game of the 44 players that played, I think, or at least from the Melbourne side. I think that we did really cleverly in terms of adapting our game and getting distance. And one of them, I think, was McNamara there. The goal that Bannon kicked was McNamara was clever enough to kick it off the ground. And the speed of, the comparative speed of Bannon compared to anyone else on that field was amazing. And she's got something about her. I just love watching her play footy, but she's clever. Totally agree on Pearce. I think she was our best player, and I'd say she's been our best player all season, just about. But I think our path to victory on Saturday is to go back to what we do, is to look for those overlap handballs, to run, to hit our targets, to go through the corridor. When we're on, we're really aggressive with our ball movement. We look to spread. We couldn't do that. I thought Brisbane were terrific in the clinches, but it wasn't the day for it. It was unfortunate because the rain, as you said, was consistent all the way through, just enough to put water on the surface, but not look like it was raining if you were watching on telly. So I think if we try to just play a territory kick it long game, physical against Adelaide, they'll smash us. They're too strong. So I think we've got to play to our strength in what they've been training and get it on the outside and be aggressive with our ball movement and get one-on-one to Taylor Harris. And if the conditions are good, I think we've got a good chance of getting it. We've got to get it looking. The game has to look like that for us to win, I think. The other one, so Bannon was terrific. McNamara was terrific. As you say, Paxman was terrific. But a couple of defenders that I just completely love is Goldie. Shelley Heath. And your point about the low scores is interesting. I said at the game, it's a bit like soccer, how some acts have outsized importance in terms of their ultimate impact on the game. And I can't recall, I think it was just on the shadow of three-quarter time, or maybe it was at half-time, I can't recall. Shelley Heath, it looked all the world like they were going to score, and she did an incredible effort to scrap with two players and somehow force either a point or a throw-in down at the city end. And it was completely just gut running to get to the contest, just refused to give up, refused to concede a goal. And it was the sort of thing that changes matches, saves matches. So I just think she's fantastic to watch. And it was great that she made the All-Australian team. So, and Goldie too.
Yeah, Gabby Colvin did a similar sort of save right in the goal square as well. Again, both of those were certain goals coming, but And like you, I just love Goldrick. Just fantastic. Someone described her performance as kamikaze. And it's exactly that. When she sees the ball in front of her, she is going to get it. I would hate to be an opposition player seeing her coming at the ball, because she is going to go absolutely straight through the middle of
straight
it.
line.
It's
so I know she's Irish and Sean White was Scottish. But she reminds me so much of the way he played footy, straight line running and, a little bit all elbows and moving parts, but, just knows one way of playing footy and just really thrilling to watch.
Unfortunately, sometimes she forgets that the opposition can tackle you.
Did one away.
We'll give her away a couple of those because her physical strength and attack at the contest in the back line was just critical, absolutely critical.
And the other thing, just quickly, that they've got to do next week is they've just got to deny Phillips the ball. I mean, she's, I think, the best player that I've seen play AFL. I mean, Daisy probably is. Daisy had, picked up the ball and half volley just in front of where I was sitting, and she's such good skill. But Erin Phillips is just both an incredible athlete. I think Daisy too, but I mean, they're both stars. But you can't give her a sniff. If she gets 6 chances, she'll kick 5 goals, and so they've got to find a way to shut it.
And in the middle, Marinoff's is a real danger as well. But I think another one for us who goes under the radar a lot is Liv Purcell in the middle, who's
She's been a
only
great
played.
kicker, hasn't she?
She is fantastic, and she does a power of work in the middle that people just don't see. Under
And
the
maybe Westy will get a tagging job.
Yeah. If Westy could kick, she would be one of the greatest pickups. But she's one of the worst kicks that you can imagine. She can't kick either foot, so it doesn't really matter. But she had, for someone who came from the VFL, she has slotted right in, and so much talent there. She is an absolute extractor of the ball. So great to have her in there.
Well, the forecast for both the men's on Thursday night and the women's on Saturday is perfect. It's Thursday, the day's 23, but should be clear, and 18 sort of as we play, 19, 18 degrees when we play, perfect conditions. But the women's is sunny, and it might be a little too hot because it's 27, forecast of 27 degrees, but that might be a little bit later because I think we're playing at 12. Is that correct?
30, I think. Yeah,
it's about 24 degrees at that time. So maybe perfect conditions, but it'll be heating up as the game wears on. All right, well, let's hope we are celebrating a premiership next week. Well, there is a massive week coming up on Demon Land. Wednesday night, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be interviewing former Demon, current Premiership assistant coach Adam Uze, and I cannot wait for this. So many questions about not only his current position at the club, but he also is one of my personal favourite all-time Demon players. We'll release the interview on Wednesday night. And we'll be back next week, hopefully celebrating another Demon Premiership and a 4-0 start to the 2022 season. Go Demons.
Go Red Legs.